Okay, we continue in Reishis Chochma. In our last session, he brought from the Chassid Yaivitz that Yiras Cheto Kodem LeChochmaso, that Chochmaso Mitzchemes, that Chochmaso that was referred to in the Mishnah, says the Chassid Yaivitz, is the limud of Kabbalah. Right? That's where the Chochma is the Maisa, because the limud of Halacha, there's still another step, of doing it, where it's chachma per se. The chachma is everything, because with this wisdom, you have done the maisa of clinging to God with this wisdom. So his wisdom is not it's not the means to an end, but it is the end in itself. That is, that is the chachma per se, where the chachma is its own goal, and yiraschet that you need before the chachmas kabbalah, it's essential that without yiras shamayim, as intelligent as you are, you will not be zocher to understand it. You will not be zocher to understand it correctly. Only bad things will happen, and that's the added tefillah of our nenu b'sar sechad. After we already asked for bina lahavin lahaskil shma lumot olamed, so open my eyes. The opening of the eyes, which is above stam intellectual understanding, is for chachmas kabbalah that pure intellectual power will not enable you to understand it. It's a necessary ingredient, but that alone doesn't do the trick. That alone may do it for halacha, but not for Kabbalah. You need Yiras Shamayim because it's invisible even to the brightest mind, unless there's Yiras Shamayim, and then you could be Zocha to V'ha'erin in a Gal Einai V'abidifos Mitarasecha. And that was all from the Chassid Yaivitz. And let's go to the previous session where we learned that all inside. Now he wants to bring a raya from the Zohar to everything the Chassid Yaivitz said. Beside the door of Yesh Bezor Parsha Shlacha, and a support for what he says, we can find the Zohar in Parsha Shlach. Kuf Tes Amid Aleph in the is it Kuf Tes? No, it's Kuf Samach Amid Aleph. Right, Kidor Shom Rishim by Chalav Shom Parsha Magam. Let's start the Rishim by Yochai. Darshan the whole Parsha of Meraglim. That it's also aside from the Pashim shot, it could also be taken as a allegorically referring to being Oisuk Torah. Valmar, it says regarding the Meraglim, at Nachal Eshkol, they came until the river of the cluster. So what is that? So allegorically, what does that represent? Elu Inon Mili Agada. The Nachal Eshkol is the words of Agadata. Drasha, right? It's it's Agad Mili Agada of Drasha. It's the words of Agadata and Drasha, which is that's the hardware of Sod. The Tayyib Mesitra Ruz, it all comes from the side of Emuna. Olifim Mitaman Rashi Prokim Rashi Milan, right? From there, we learn, just the Rashi Prokim, the Rashi drum that you a Meiser Merkava. If the person is even a Yachid, if he's Chacham, maybe not Muslim Rashi Prokim. So you drop him cluster bombs. So you can't even tell to him in detail. So I'm guessing. And you're going to have to, right? I am guessing that, the Nachal Eshkol, the river of clusters, you give them clusters that they have to unpack themselves, right? There's Rashi Prokim, right? Rashi Milan. The Bnei Musachar Milan, of course, those who are Bnei Emuna, they have tremendous simcha from those Rashi Prokim, but they're Bnei Emuna, right? Was Baruch Milin Begavayo Mistaklon, right? And now also the words of the Sod, these clusters that were handed to them, those they get blessed, meaning they learn these clusters, these Rashi Prakim, and it unpacks in their mind. And it's called that becomes blessed because it increases, because these clusters, these capsules, unpack themselves in the man's mind and heart. Mistaklan, they become wise. So now the expansion is called blessed. It's all one root and one central pillar, right? And there is no separation. Meaning, even though the cluster, unpacks itself in many different directions. It's all, but it's a perfectly unified wisdom, right? Uh, all right. So I guess the point that he wants here is that it's all for. I'm guessing the reason why he brought this Zohar in connection to Chassidus is it's B'nai Menusa, the B'nai Amuna. You have to, an Apikuris cannot learn Kabbalah. So these guys like person Gershon Shalom and his students that were academics that did not necessarily believe in Torah Min Hashemayim were lacking Yiras Shamayim in many ways. Their Kabbalah is nothing. You have to be B'nai Menusa, right? I think that's the point that he wanted. You have to be B'nai Menusa. So he says, it's time, Mr. Menusa, you have to be B'nai Menusa, right? Yeah, it comes from the side of Emunah. Not because will not understand Kabbalah and certainly will not appreciate it. It comes from the side of Emunah, and you need to be a Ben Emunah. Okay. Now he actually is going to address an issue that I've heard many people, and it's bothered me. Right? There's someone that say that why do you call Chochma's Kabbalah Chochma per se when the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Alf, Dafka says that it divides up the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah according to the pasuk emunas itecha chosen Yeshua's chachma vadas. Emunas is seder zorim, itecha seder moed. Chosen, right, is seder nashim. Yeshua's is seder nezikin. Chachma is seder kachim, and das is seder taras. So the Gemara said kachim is called chachma. So why do you say Kabbalah is called chachma? Seder kachim is called chachma. So for this raya from this Gemara that if you wanted something should be called Chochma per se, it's Kachim and not Kabbalah. With a Tikshi, right? But let's first, before we answer this, the guy who's asking the question, we can ask him. Shemina Roy Yosef called Chochma Seder Nezikin. Sharon Mishab Sof Balbasa. I'm Rosh Hashanah. I can ask what they're moments. Shenchom Mitzvah Batar Yoser Mehen. Ben Kamaya Novea, if just ask, well, wouldn't be befitting, that if H should be called Chachma, it should be Dinei Mominus, and that stems with a Mishnah in Bal Basra, at the end of Bal Basra, Kofayin Hey. Rabbi Shmuel said anyone who wants to become wise should be Isaac and Dinei Mominus, because there's no area of Torah like Dinei Mominus. That's where we get into the Svaras and, the most svaras and the most pilpul, and then and a lot of it is built on svara, is in Dinei Mominus, and it's like a flowing river, just doesn't stop. Mominus is where the action is. You want to get smart, you want to get sharp, you want to get wise. Mominus, all right. Elavare Ein Misham Raya Klau, right? So it is not built on svara. This drasha obviously from the Gemara and Shabbos that made Chochma parallel to Seder Kachim is not built on svara, because out svara then you should call Nezikin Dinei Mominus Chochma. Mojo tells our buzz outside Mikra, but the drasha was leading to something deep, and of course it wasn't by happenstance that they had a pasuk that had 6 things mentioned. Oh, and then there's 6 Sidrei Mishnah. No. There was a cheshbon, but it's a very particular cheshbon, right? And what does that say to Zorim? Well, it says over there. After all, it says let's unpack it. Emuna is Seder Zorim, all the mitzvah tzlius baretz. V'das and knowledge, right? Seder Taharos, right? Right, so hey, how does that square away? What does Emunah have to do with Seder Zroim? What does Das have to do with Seder Taras? Right, so the truth is that the Gemara had a different cheshbon that stems. Like I said, I always say I learned this book b'chavus with you. I don't prep ahead of time. Maybe I should, but I don't. So I did not look up this tikkunim in Akdama. But he's saying that if you take a look in the Tikkun Zohar, right, you will see exactly what that drasha meant. That drasha is mechuvin al pisod as a particular relationships, very particular relationships between these storim and those terms, but very particular ones. Not that only Taras is Das. What Das doesn't apply to all of Torah, and only Zroim is Emunas. Obviously, the whole thing is a particular thing al pisod, and cannot be taken as a raya. That Kabbalah is not a chochma because Kachim is called chochma. You see, you can't say that. Okay. Like the divrei chassid yavitz. Okay. But I'll now back up what he says that Kabbalah is called Chochma per se. Mi brisa Rabbi Shmuel shitaknu el, right? From a different brisa of Rabbi Shmuel that we brought down earlier, a few pages ago. After you get this big faher, you get tested at the end of days, big time, right? And they would ask you about Gemara. And when they ask you about Gemara, they ask you about Meiser Kava and Shir Kama, Shir Kiyidiyas Chachmas, which is, those are topics that belong to, sort of Chachmas comes to explain. So you see, a Kabbalah is called Gemara, the when you take Gemara to its deepest level, right? Right. So of course, if Gemara is for the wise, Kavachomer, this which is called the Spitz of Gemara. And we spoke about this earlier. So, yeah. It's a, Kabbalah is a chachma. It is the deepest. If Torah in general is a chachma, Kavachomer, Kabbalah. If Gemara is a chachma, Kavachomer, Kabbalah, which is the spitz of it, right? Cutting edge of it, the highest point of it. Okay. Also ask after we decided that we're going to make this book. Right? So I decided to arrange it into 5 gates, 5 sections. Shar Rishon by Yira, Koshbar Bakno Shar Yira. Right, so first one is going to be on Yira, right? Fear of God. And I'm going to explain to you why in my Hakdam, I'm going to write to Shar Yira. Shar Sheni Ba'ava, and the second section is on love of God. Shar Shishi B'tshuva, the third section is how to do tshuva. Sharvi B'Kedusha, the fourth section is about attaining holiness. Shar Chamishi, and the fifth gate, the fifth section, Ba'anava, right, how to attain humility. Right. So now in each of these sections, we will explain exactly why we put this section next to this section and why this one was first and this one came after it. And then a lot of the things, there'll be chidushim that you will not see in the old, classical Musar Svar. Right. So now I did want to also have a shar about the Indian of Torah and the godless of Limud Torah, right? But I left it because a lot of the godless of Limud Torah is already in the Sefer Minas Ma'or of Yitzchak Abu Hav. So he already did all the work. So we're saying everything I would have written in my shar Torah is already in the Minas Ma'or of Yitzchak Abu Hav. There's another Minas Ma'or that he's going to reference in a second, but it was all right. In the Minas Ma'or of Yitzchak Abu Hav. I'm not going to trouble myself for saying that was already made. This was Yitzchak Abu Hav the first, not another one that lived later. God, in the days of after the time of the Arizal. Okay, this was Yitzchak Abu Hav the first. Also, as far as Kavanas Tefillah and the Inyan of Tefillah, so he's here for the Sefer Tolas, I believe, is from Meir Ibn Gabai, a very big Makobel, big critic of the Rambam. It is said that the Maharal's Yedias of Kabbalah and his approach to Kabbalah is mainly from the Kabbalah of Meir Ibn Gabai, and that's in the Sefer Tolas Yaakov. So it was already done. Anything I would write about Tefillah, he already wrote, and is over there. Now, even though I have what to add, I have chidushim, but still, I don't want to speak at length when most of the essential knowledge was already compiled. Okay. Amrisi Chamish Brokim Nosrosh Rav Yisrael Vashal went to Xavia. There's a Rav Yisrael Tigam Lavim based on Kadesh Yag the Torah Viadir Ruba Nogel Maisa. Right, but there's another Minar Samar of Rabbi Yisrael. I think his last name was on the Kava, I do believe, but check me on that. I think his name was Rabbi Yisrael on the Kava, but check me on that. So that's the other Minar Samar, right? So and in his day was in manuscript. It has subsequently been printed in my library in Eretz Yisrael. I wish I missed my storm so much. My library in Eretz Yisrael, I do have it. It was subsequently printed. There's the Minar Samar of Rabbi Yisrael. I believe his last name was on the cover, but check me out on that. So now, since it was only a manuscript, I'm going to print it. I'm going to print Kadesh Yagel Torah to increase Torah. Rubono Gemais, and a lot of it is Nogea Lamaisa. This book is about how to Lamaisa be a good Jew. Lamaisa, and he's got a lot of prokim that are right. Nogea Lamaisa, and what are these prokim that he's going to bring from the the Menasor of Rabbi Yisrael? Parak particular how to properly do mitzvahs. A chapter on how to raise kids. Oh man, I could have used that years ago. Parak Masu Batamuna, another chapter on how to do business honestly. Parak Bin Adin, there's a chapter that talks about Inyone and how God judges us. Parak B'derech Eretz, parak about proper conduct. Derech Eretz, Sham Perder, not to say Chupas Elio, Cloud Kitzer Seven Nasor, Sharav Yisrael Alav Hashem, and that parak Derech Eretz, we're going to bring a book called Chupas Elio, right, which he was writing. His name was Elio. And it's kind of a synopsis of the Minar Samar of this Rav Yisrael. And I am now begging anyone who's analyzing a book that if he finds any mistake, so use your intelligence to figure out. I think he's talking about a mistake as in a printing error. It was a typo, right? So which was very, very, very common, as we know. Back in the old Sforim, they didn't have these, they didn't see it on the screen first to correct. And if it was already, they set the leading, the lead letters, very big pain in the neck to undo if there's a mistake, because you have to undo the whole line. I'm not going to get into it. These machines don't exist anymore. And that's why printing has become so much cheaper, which is not always an advantage, because that's where you get a lot of garbage printed also, because it's, it's too cheap to print. Right, but anyway, so if you find a mistake type, which were very common, it was right there. That's why in old Sforim they didn't correct the type, because it would be too much work to undo how they put all the lead letters. You'd have to undo to pull out the wrong letter. But just Google it, how the old printing plates worked. Right, so it's just easier for them to put luach tikotos, to put another page of corrections, than undoing. That's the reason. Google it, or you'll see. So okay, so you see there was a printing error. Use your intelligence, figure out it must be like this. Because listen, I had to get this book out, and look, I didn't have time to proof it. Right, I didn't have time to proof it. But again, but right, immune tzachil harbe ben gives us advus la gersa shalanu. But don't tamper. If you think that there's a printing error in the Zohar, don't touch it, because you're better off with me than the Zohar you're reading from, because the most exact manuscripts of Zohar were in Tzfat. This was, he's living, he lived at the time of the Ramak and the Arizal. Going to see for the time that he signs up over here was the time the Ari was living. He does not seem to have been Zoche, to have been added to the exclusive group that learned by the Arizal, right? But he was alive at that time when it was the hotbed of Limud Kabbalah. And we here in Tzfat have the best and most accurate Zohars. So just the opposite. Don't think that there's a typo in mine, right? And you have and your Zohar is better because I have the best Zohar, so you're best relying on me. Okay. Well, as Chalpia Marisha, see Revach Benin, Giamatic, Lo, some Revach Karoi, Karo Bashak Yusha, Kazav Kantikun, Tikun, Oispritz, Yas Revach Ben Tikun, Latikun. Now, by the way, future printers, I'm asking you that, the guy who copied, copied it, first copied my manuscript, he did not put proper space in. Like in Shar Kedusha, I wrote a few different tikkunim to do for Chasram Pagama Bris. So, he just copied like straight as if it's all one big paragraph. Every tikkun, make some space between them. Chen Shar Tshuva, Baras Tshuva, and also in Shar Tshuva, in the ways to awaken to Tshuva. So the guy, my copyist, made it like one long paragraph. Separate, the separate points. And they said in Shara Nova. Okay, look, we finished Agdava. He finished it in Tzvat in the year Shin Lamed Hay. I don't know if the Arizal, I think the Arizal died. I can't remember if the Arizal died in Shin Lamed Hay or Shin Lamed Ches. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's roughly the time when the Ari was there, or either had been there or was still there. And, this is when the hotbed of Kabbalah. Numatzar Eliyahu ben Rabbi Moshe Dividias. Right, the words of Eliyahu, the son of Rabbi Moshe Dividias, and he finished this book in the year Shin Lamed Hay. Right, this was so if Tav Shin Lamed Hay was night is I think this is 1575. 1575. Check me on that. 1575. Yeah. 1575 sounds right. Right, on the 18th of the month of Adar. I think that's correct. 1570. Okay. All right, you check. Shin Lamed, Hey Alafim, Shin Lamed, and Yud Ches Adar. Okay, Malu, we got through the introduction. All right, the best is yet to come. Okay, Rabbi Sai, I'm recording this on an Erev Shabbos, and therefore, if anyone is listening live, have a good Shabbos, everybody.